I was on a live the other day with my friend and I asked her, how do you feel about children attending funerals? Mm-hmm. And in my community, especially in my generation, we have, because I went to the funerals when I was a child. I remember my great grandma's funeral. I remember going to a lot of funerals. I feel like I went to way more funerals as a child than I do as an adult, right? But I think that we have gotten we've gotten better at trying to protect kids from grief, that we give them the option of not attending. They don't really understand, what the meaningfulness of a funeral is anymore, because the meaning has changed over time. So what would be your advice, or what would you say to answer that question about children attending funerals?
So thank you, Joy, for this opportunity. And I want to thank everyone out across the world, because I understand there's people who are attending this event across the world. I think I really would like to start there, because generally everything I talk about has context in it, context and relationship. So I think the context for every family is really looking at, okay, so what are our thoughts about funerals? What's the purpose? What's the meaning making behind it? And have the adults really be able to think about that first. Because if it's about memorializing and taking people, including the children, through a ritual of remembrance, taking them through a process, I think we have to really stand back and figure out, okay, so in the context of who died, how they died, what's their relationship to the child, how do we want to involve that child in the memory and meaning making? So that means you have to look at developmentally where the child is, and then really look at the people who surround the child. Is somebody willing or able to explain things to them?
Right. I know you referred.
Yeah, I know you referred to the early loss of your sister, and I think I can relate to that, because the question is who's able to help the child understand, and that might mean who's taking them to the wake, because some families in America, they have a wake, they have another ceremony where they go and they have people view the body. Who's going to explain to the child what dead means? Right. Who's going to explain to the child why we're doing what we're doing? So I think when we decide to engage children, we have to have somebody who's going to help them understand. And part of what what I do in my work and the work that I've done over the last 20, 30 years or so is really trying to get people to look at, how do we start talking about this before somebody dies? Because I think what I like about what you've curated and put together is we're not just talking about death. We're talking about loss. So early on, if we can get children talking about loss, sometimes it might help them transition into something that dies. So I really like to say, look at this in the moment, but also look at it across the long term. Because go back to development for a minute. A 5-year-old may not understand the permanency of death. So they might go to a funeral and then ask where their grandfather is the next day.
Right.
Because it might be that they saw them at the funeral and they heard that word dead and their body's not working, but they don't understand that doesn't mean that they're not going to be there for them tomorrow. So I think part of this is very complicated, because depending on where the child is developmentally, you may have to continue to reinforce the message. Okay. Let's say somebody spiritually and religiously says the person goes to heaven. Are you prepared to explain what that means? Because if you go to heaven, maybe they think they're coming back from heaven.
Right. Okay.
And then, and I don't know how complicated you want me to make this. So I think I was either listening to a presentation or one of the speakers here or another speaker, because I listen to this stuff all the time, what happens if the person who died visits the child spiritually?
Oh yeah, we have a grief one. I mean, a
Right.
grief and dreams
Yes,
presentation coming
absolutely.
up.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That was what I was thinking about when you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about that. It's like, are we going to tell that child that they didn't get that visit from that person? They didn't visit with them? Or are we going to really, as adults, try to situate ourselves such that we understand our own grief, and it gives us a lens to help, not just a lens, but it gives us that embodiment or our ability to sit with what the child is saying without judgment and support them. So you might say, how does that connect to funerals and going to those ceremonies? I think because that's what we oftentimes focus on, it's a great place to start the conversation. But I think working with our children and knowing them prior to a death and knowing them during the process as they change is just really important.
Okay. So I wanted, before I even get into my sister, because I
Mm-hmm.
definitely do want to share how I experienced and processed that.
Mm-hmm.
My very first experience with death was when I was 10 years old.
10, right.
My great grandmother lived in Georgia and I lived in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would visit her every summer. I had a good
Right.
I have vivid memories of my grandmother right now as an adult from spending with her times as a child. Well, first, my grandmother's sister lived on the same land as my grandmother, my great grandmother, and my great aunt. And so I don't have many memories of my great aunt besides that summer. Well, as soon as I got home in the middle of the school year, maybe September, my great aunt passed away. And so when my parents told me, they told me casually because they didn't realize that I had built such a good bond with her that summer. And when I fell apart, they panicked because they was like, wait, I didn't know she was that close to her. Like, it was just one summer. But that's not only with children, because adults do that. We build really good relationships with people sometimes in a split second. And when it comes to children, like I remember when they told me, I remember just crying hysterically. I remember it, even though I was 10 at the time. But then the very next year, my great grandmother passed away. And they were scared to tell me because that was the next death. And they was like, if she handled the first death that way, I don't know what to tell her or how to handle. So what happened was this summer I was in Texas. And so they wanted to tell me in person because they wanted to make sure that I had the support. I was in Texas with my mother's brother. And even though he was close with me, he wouldn't been able to console me the way that they thought that I would need to be consoled. Well, by the time they told me, the funeral had already taken place. Everything had happened. Like they just took, like all of that was done. And then it was like, well, your great grandmother passed away. And she was 88. I handled that one way differently and way better because it wasn't as unexpected. Like at that time, I understood people don't live forever. And I understood that one day she might die. So they were shocked that I had a more peaceful understanding of her death than I did of my grandmother's sister. So I wanted to share that experience because I think that number one, kids don't always articulate themselves well. Like I couldn't tell them at 10, this is how I felt. But now as an adult, I look back like they robbed me of my great grandmother's, her funeral, the things that they did to kind of find closure in that. I don't have any hard emotions attached to it, but logically I feel like it was handled wrong, and it was just because they didn't know any better and they were just trying to protect me as opposed to supporting me in those times. So what comes out of that from just me sharing that experience?
Yeah. I think one of the things that immediately pops into my mind is that your ability to use what you've learned over your lifetime in the grief process is critical, because in some ways it determines how you see what's happening in the moment. And I think one of the harder things for adults is having that ability to unpack how they are handling their children in the context of how they see grief and how they experience grief as young people. So, because one of the things that I find the most interesting is in my work, people are usually calling to get help for the kids. And part of what we do is we will listen, but then we are trying to help them unpack that story about how they're coping. Because the way they are coping is really going to be at some level in proportion to how the child is going to cope. Because I think at some level, if you look back on it, you might have been at some level watching your parents when there was a death that they were aware of. And even if you weren't watching them, you were picking up on their vibes. You were picking up on what they were feeling, how they were behaving, what they said and what they did. So I think for me, it might sound odd. I think it's very important for the caregiver, and I don't want to say parent because a lot of adults help take care of children. It's very important for them to get in touch with what they're thinking, feeling, and doing around the loss, because parents have a tough responsibility, and that's to help their child hold their feelings. Okay, your job is not to stop their feelings. It's not to control their feelings, but it's to be able to sit with them and support them in their confusion, anger, sadness, and make those feelings okay. And while you're sitting in those feelings, be able to adjust, because a kid might be mad one minute and wanting to go play the next minute. So really what I'm saying is,
no, I know it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that parent's ability to be agile is critical, but I think a lot of it is constrained by what adults don't know about themselves. So they might not know that they might be trying to protect themselves.
Wow, right.
Rather than protecting you, because they don't want you to feel bad. They don't want Joy to be crying like she cried the last time, because if you think about it, think about the generational messages. Okay, so what did your parents understand about feelings? What did your grandparents teach them and you about feelings? Are feelings okay? Because might not have been okay for you to be crying and so upset. It doesn't mean they didn't love you. It just means that they might have had a hard time holding the authentic joy. Because joy is being authentic. I'm just so upset. And that's just hard for parents to hold, that their child is upset, because they believe their job is to not ever have their child upset.
But so what's popping into my mind is two things. So I actually have 4 children, right? My oldest is 9, my youngest is 3.
Okay.
I can tell you with all honesty, before I became a parent, I had no idea. And I'm an only child. I'm an only child from my mom. I was raised an only child. And so for me to have to manage 4 different personalities and me to have to see these 4 children that they have some of my qualities, but they are individuals in their own right. And so the immediate thing that I think about is, how do you do that for multiple kids? Because my mom just had me to worry about. So she was able to do all of the caring and concern. And I lived in a bubble my whole life. So I know you just said you're watching your parents. I don't remember how any of my parents grieved anybody, because I just lived in my little bubble and everything was my world. But you're right. I still picked up on those moods and those mannerisms. I just didn't attach it to grief. Because, for example, my mother lost her best friend, and I remember going to the hospital. I was a kid, probably middle school. I remember going to the hospital. I remember, I know that this was her best friend, but I did not even see the depression that my mother was in, because she did a good job shielding it from me, and I lived in my bubble. And so a lot of times kids have their own things going on. They're trapped in their own world at school and all of the things that they have going on that they don't even know. what the parent is carrying and what kind of things they're doing, because I really had no idea. So I do want to ask you just about those two perspectives, the perspective of someone who has multiple kids, and then the perspective of kids who are just so self-absorbed that they don't even see what the parent is experiencing. They can't even grasp it. It's because a lot of people, my generation, we're the ones to admit, like, being a parent is such a hard thing, because how do you put your own feelings aside and do what's best for your child all the time? Is some people don't even have the capacity to do that 24/7. And so I definitely want to get your feedback on those two things.
Okay. So let's start right there. The capacity to put their feelings to the side. I want to say that that's not necessarily humanly possible. Right. I think one of the goals is just to be mindful of what you're feeling. So when you, of course, I've never met your children, but when you're talking, I'm seeing the image of you and your children. And I'm seeing the 9-year-old and the 3-year-old, and in my mind, I'm making up what the other ages are. And I'm seeing them as individual entities, right? That are engaged with you in this family system. So I think part of what you want to do is give yourself permission to understand that in the moment you are doing the best you can do. And they're being well taken care of. And then look at them as individuals and look at what their capacity is.
Right.
Okay. What can the 9-year-old take care of? Because you don't want any of the 4 of them to have to take care of you. Okay? Right. So therefore, what I suggest to people to consider is what are your other supports looking like? So as you said, they're like, over 400 or 500 people engaged in this learning process of Gone Too Soon. What I would suggest to you is, even with your limited time, to consider what your other supports are, because you're not going to be able to understand everything that's going on with your child. But there are other people, hopefully other adults in your family system or in your community that can help with that. So, for example, are there other 9-year-olds that your 9-year-old may be talking about this, and they don't want to talk to you about it? And this might be somebody dying, or this just might be, you know what, I don't like school right now. So you're really looking at the socialization of your children and where their supports are. So do they have a counselor? Do they have a supportive teacher? Do they have a supportive person in the faith community? Are they on a team where if mommy can't listen, who else can listen? And who else can give them what they need? Because really, I think what's going on in our society is a little different from when I grew up. When I grew up, you only had access to a limited amount of people.
Right,
okay?
Right.
Because, you had a phone and you had to actually turn the dial around. So, and your school was limited. So you only interacted with a few people. Our young people and us, we have access to so much.
Oh, wow, yes.
To work on is there's too much information. So how do we winnow that information down to what's going to be supportive and helpful for my child? So if there's a death in your family or a big loss, can you communicate with the teachers and the guidance counselors?
Right.
So that if they see a change in that child's behavior, maybe they can alert you or they can adjust. Or, as many caregivers are concerned about, they have a parent that dies and they don't see any change. Okay? So they're like calling us and saying, well, he's acting the same. And we listen, don't judge it, and just say, okay, right now, he's not reacting outwardly. but just
Right.
understand that he knows that his granddad is not here anymore. Mm-hmm. And he had a relationship with his granddad, and, just be there for him and support him where he is. So we've got this thing where we've got multiple children. Part of how I help myself, and I can't put that on to you, is to see them as a system.
Okay.
Because you all are a system. And the 9-year-old is reacting to the 3-year-old. When the 3-year-old was born, the 9-year-old was 6. That change in your family, they all were adjusting to it. So their ability to adjust to it is there. But the question is, are we talking about change? Because change is what we cannot get away from. So having that dialogue about what change is. So when the 9-year-old goes from, what grade is he or she in?
He's in 4th grade.
So he went from 3 to 4. That's a change. Are we talking about that change? If they go to a different school, I mean, think about this. And you were in Georgia and I was in Virginia when I was a kid. So you just remember in the summer, you were thinking, what grade am I going to?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be in the class? Who's going to be my teacher? What school am I going to? So think about this. They're negotiating this all the time. And then a death disrupts, but they have some information to help negotiate this. You have information to negotiate this. And then your trusted friends or a therapist or a group that you start, because you might just start a group that meets once a month just to talk about how I manage myself,
right,
while I'm supporting 4 beautiful children.
Right.
So it's real. In some ways, it's about. This sounds scary, but I'll say it. It's about we and me simultaneously, because you cannot forget you, because your health and your wellness is inextricably connected to the kids. You're responsible for them. They're not responsible for you. In some ways, culturally, you have to unpack that too, because some cultures put that responsibility on kids and their relationships to adults and other people in their family. So always context. Everything I say, don't think that it applies in what's another country that people have been logging on?
We have a lot of people from Australia.
Okay, so don't think that applies in Australia. One of the things that I was listening to more recently is they're talking about one of the most optimum family configurations was hunter-gatherers, because in hunter-gatherer society, there was always more than one adult around, and they always had the kids right under them. Whereas we send our kids off to school, we send them off to camp,
right.
And that actually disaggregates the adult care, but also at some level it specializes it. Because I can tell you, I grew up around a lot of aunts and uncles,
right?
And then you go down to lowercase aunties and people in the community.
Yeah.
So that caregiving was dispersed in a different way than it was at some level when I was growing up. So you are not alone. You have support. And the question is, do you have enough energy? And I wasn't on Oceana's talk, but I know Oceana. Can you open up your senses enough to hear and see that there's somebody out there that can help you.
So we have Sarah. She says, this is amazing. Gives me things to think about when supporting my 3-year-old who is grieving totally different than my 4-year-old over losing their great-grandfather.
Yes. And I just want to acknowledge, and I missed the name.
Sarah.
I want to acknowledge Sarah for actually acknowledging that those 3 and 4-year-olds are actually grieving. Because 25 years ago, hardly anybody was recognizing that we all grieve at some level. And if you want to get fundamental about that, I mean, you have children, and there's a grief process once the children are birthed. It's like they're no longer, when there's a birth of the child from the mother, you're no longer in my body. You're outside my body.
I definitely grieved, so I know what you mean.
Right. People we're not paying attention to that. Right. And I'm thinking too, it's like you got a gift when you were able to go visit in the summer, because you got to see how it was to be not to be around your parents, have that separation, but also connect with the other part of your family. Because that's really important for children, to have a larger set of people that they know are here for them.
And I have a point to make to that. Yeah. So, and for those of you that's just tuning in, Mr. Carter is talking about supporting grieving children. So if you have questions, please drop a question in the comment section. I'm talking about my own personal experiences because I want to be able to get some ideas out, things that might trigger you to think about how Sarah thought about her children and processing that. But now I'm about to lose my train of thought. No, I was on the live with one of my friends, and she mentioned how our generation has stopped sleepovers and have stopped, allowing our kids. So just yesterday, my kids were out. We just moved to this house January. And so I want them to have friends in the neighborhood. I don't know any of my neighbors so far, and it's already September. Well, it's 2 kids that were playing with my kids outside yesterday. And that was what my daughter said, oh, I wanted to show her around my house. And she was like, my mom wouldn't like that because we don't do that anymore. But when I was a kid, I had a best friend across the street that I was at her house. I remember what her house looks like because that's how often I was there as a kid. And that's not what we're doing now in this generation. And so that's what popped into my head is that when we were talking about it last week, the conversation was, well, there's a benefit of being able to be in other people's houses because then you realize that everybody doesn't operate the way that you operate. And there are different, you see them at school, but it's not the same as when you go to their house for dinner or you go to their house to play on a Saturday afternoon, or you just have a sleepover. You're able to go and see how that household is run compared to yours. And I think even though that's kind of straying away from the topic of grief, we're losing those connections with other people. So then when it comes time to grieve, we think everybody's going to grieve like how we grieve. Well, this is what happened in my family. I remember the first time my son ever brought up death, and it caught me totally off guard. Yeah. He said his friend at school, I feel like it was 2 or 3 years ago. So he was only in like first grade. He's like, my friend told me, I think he just asked me, Mommy, are you going to die one day? And I was like, yes, everybody dies. And he was like, I remember him saying something about his friend's mom or his friend's dad died because she was fat. And I was like, well, people don't die from being fat. They may have been sick. They might have had, something had to have happened for them to die. Like I tried my best to explain it at a level that he would understand. But it was just, I felt myself being like, I don't want to have this conversation instead of me fully embracing his curiosity and educating him in that moment, because my worst fear is that he learns something from his peers and he doesn't bring it to me because he thinks that I'm not going to engage with him in conversation about it. Right.
So I want to applaud you for staying open and then being aware this is uncomfortable. And I don't necessarily like it, but you went ahead and you followed through on that conversation anyway, because I think that's one of the challenges is when we get shocked by questions that young people have for us, do we shut down or do we stay open? And also, even after that, do we stay curious? And part of the way you stay curious is you just let them know. Thank you for bringing this to me. I'm going to even think about it a little more. And then I'm going to come back to you and see if you have any more thoughts and see if you have any more questions, because mommy's really thinking about this one. And I think one of the things that you're pointing out, and I think it's a thread through the whole platform and conference, is how do we do relationships in 2022? Because if you think about it, okay, so I'm gonna be transparent. I'm in my basement, so there's some vulnerability to you all seeing me on the camera. You look like you're in a home, right? So it's like we're letting people in. Yeah. So we have to be more curious about how we maintain those boundaries, because boundaries and safety are important. But I think we want to be more intentional about how we navigate them. So to be able to invite a child over, you would have to connect with their parents or their caregivers. To be able to connect with their caregivers, you got to develop a relationship. And the question is, are we set up for that right now? I don't know if we are, because at some level we're very busy, and relationships become secondary. And that's the struggle, I think, in all families of all kinds and all sizes, is how do you make the relationship primary when you're trying to work, they're trying to get their school done, they're trying to get their clubs done, they're trying to get in the next best school, trying to get in the next best college. So how do we keep relationships central? Because this takes me back to the beginning. It's not just about death. It's about loss and change and death and grief. You all see these videos, which always get me. These videos where the child goes off to school, the older children go off to school, younger children are at home, and then when the older children come from school, the little child goes and runs to them and hugs them. Okay, I'm sure that doesn't happen in every family every day, but it's just another lesson that there's loss and change, and people are navigating and negotiating that in very healthy ways on a daily basis. And the one that I always like to use is, I always ask adults this: how did you negotiate going from leaving high school? And I always ask them, did you do the I'll get up conversation? And the I'll get up conversation is, I'm going to see you. And then foot, I don't know how many years ago I graduated. I haven't seen most of those people because I didn't want to say goodbye.
Oh, I was just meaning your friends from school. Yeah, like, I'll see you. I get me.
Yeah, I'll see you. And everybody's like, I'll get up with you. And I'm not suggesting that you have to do all these formal goodbyes, but I think you have to be more intentional about what that looks like. You all know that if you visit with somebody, let's say you're visiting or somebody comes to visit and, they stay in the weekend, and all of a sudden on Sunday, it's like everybody starts to feel weird or happy. About to be
over, right?
Yeah, because it's about to be over, particularly people that you care about. Or some, you might be happy because, it's Sunday, it's time for them to go. I don't need all these people in my house. But that's loss and grief too, right? So the more we embrace the things that are going on on a daily basis with our children and the people that are around us, it gives us more ability to look at huger losses in our life.
What I really appreciated from your talk that I never thought about. You said at the end on the video that you that you're submitted for the presentation, when kids, they are preparing for a new school year, and they used to a certain routine with this person who's no longer part of the routine, and preparing for that ahead of time. You like, and let me tell you something, I'm very guilty of this. I never prepare for stuff until it's right here in my face, and it's like, oh, like I'll know it's coming. Like it could be like my child's birthday, and I'm bringing cupcakes to the school tomorrow, and I know I'm bringing cupcakes to the school tomorrow, but I'm like, oh, I'll just stop by Publix and grab the cupcakes. And you never really think about all of the other things that you have to do along the way that incorporate into that. And so when you think about that, when it comes to grief, it's like, we really do need to prepare, because like we're thinking about, oh my God, it's the first day of school, I miss my baby, but we're not thinking about this kid is used to going to school every year with their sibling, or they go to school and their classmate is not there, their teacher, because I haven't experienced that, I never thought about it. And that's what happens is like my stepmom. So, because I definitely want to tell a little bit of my story about my sister. My sister,
absolutely.
My stepmom was like, when she tells people that she lost her child, they're like, oh, how are you still functional? If it was me, and she always says, you don't know what it would be like if it was you until it happens to you. You have no idea. Stop telling me what you would do. Like, that's the most frustrating comment she gets. It's been almost 18 years since my sister passed away, and she carries it well, but she carries it. Just because she carries it well doesn't mean she's not carrying it. My stepmom reminds me a lot of my mom. They are both phenomenal women who they work hard, and you don't even know what they're carrying by just looking at them. But if you spend enough time with them, you'll see the humanness in them, and you'll see just how much they carry on a daily basis. And I think that because people carry things well, they don't realize that they're still hurting, or that they still have blind spots and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember exactly what you said earlier on. But these losses, they go with us. Because the question is, do we want to give that person up? And there are parts of them, there are parts of my grandfather, there are parts of my father, there's parts of my uncle, parts of my aunt that I still carry with me. Sometimes the load is a little heavier. Sometimes it's way light. But I just want to be aware that I'm carrying that with me. And sometimes it's more resolved than not. So let's say, for example, you look at, again, developmentally, your child is going to have milestones in each grade.
Right.
And then where does that person that died or that person that's gone or left fit in those milestones? Again, we'll see it in movies around graduations or around dances. But then you get down a little more granular. What if it's the traditional back to school night? What if grandpa used to go? And grandpa is not there to drive us anymore? What if you're still in the same school? And this happens for young people all around the country. And around the world, principal used to be the principal, favorite principal. And then a new principal is greeting that child. Same principal that helped that child when they had a loss, or they were feeling suicidal, or feeling a certain kind of way. Counselor's now gone. This gives the child some things that they're consciously and unconsciously motivating. Carrying, but it gives the parent one more thing that they have to think about. And that's what I'm saying. To be able to connect with the people that are in the child's life is very important. And I'll segue straight to the question. Milestones, I think, and anniversaries. I think it's the caregiver's responsibility to name them. Okay. And then explore within themselves and with the child and with the family how do we want to navigate this and negotiate this? Some people will do an annual visit to the cemetery, but it's contextual because it might be too hard. Okay. And if it's too hard, can we do a balloon release? Can we go and have a favorite meal? Can we watch a favorite movie? Can we just have fun that day?
And let the children be a part of the planning. Because I
Yes.
think a lot of times we
Yes.
as adults, we got all of our ideas,
Yes.
and we don't allow them to have equal input.
Yes. And that 3-year-old can have input. That 9-year-old can have input.
Yes.
And that's when you got that family system going. Because the 6-year-old might not want to do anything.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
They might just want to be like, y'all can have your cake. I'm not trying to be all up in that. And then, as a caregiver, you have to negotiate it.
Oh my goodness.
So I think part of the question points out is, again, those days can be very unconscious because you might get up and you're feeling very sad. You were fine the day before. And then like next year, why am I so sad in the fall? And then all of a sudden you look back, and you look up and you say, oh, that thing happened in September. And every September, my body and my spirit reminds me.
Oh my goodness, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the anniversaries are good to put on a calendar, remind yourself, and like you said, engage the children in how they might want to speak into this or acknowledge this, and then give them choices. Because if we force them, then it could be problematic. Or sometimes a little bit of pressure, they'll lean into it and say, Mom, I'm glad you said we should do this because I thought you were being corny. But that really helped to just put the song on and listen to the song and dance goofy or whatever the case may be.
So we have 15 minutes left. We're going to fill this 15 minutes up one way or another, but I want to give people opportunity. If you have questions, please go ahead and drop them. Otherwise, I'm going to use all of Mr. Carter's goodness on my personal inquiries and curiosities. Oh, I see somebody now. It says, how do you draw out kids who are withdrawing? Good question. Yes, thank you for that. That's Oceana actually asking that question. So thank you, Oceana.
Great question, Oceana. I think part of it is being patient and going where they go. So if children like to play, then how do we just get into play? Because part of the engagement is just letting them know that you're there for them. So let's say you have a child like Joy, who is more into her own world. Okay. And I think part of what you want to do there is you want to acknowledge that that's okay. That's okay. And also you want to acknowledge that there's some things that I'm going to engage in. So let's say that child has gone to the funeral and they don't want to talk. Are there books that you can hand that child to read? Are there movies that you can hand that child to read? Are there ways in which they might not want to engage with adults and find some children for them to engage, particularly if there's been a significant loss? Because they're being withdrawn might be contextual. Right. It might be they're withdrawn with us because they don't want us to see their hurt. But also they might not want us to see their joy because they might want to be happy.
Wow.
They might want to be happy.
Oh my God.
And they cannot be happy around us because every time somebody's happy, they're like, how can you be happy? Your daddy died.
Oh my God.
But the child goes from from being happy in their room and playing their games to having to be sullen. So I think it's really about trying to find out where their joy is, and allowing that ability to be withdrawn to be natural and be okay too. And let them know, sometimes mommy needs some private time too. Okay. Sometimes mommy just needs to go in the bathroom, and the four of y'all need to give me 15 minutes so I can cry, or I can just call my friend. So we need to make withdrawing being okay. And also really just begin to unpack that piece about, okay, are they safe? Are they okay? Do they feel more emotionally safe when they're with themselves? And then if they're with other people, how can that be safe too?
And you know what else? Thinking about how they might not want to be a part of one thing, but that don't mean stop inviting them to other things. Because I think sometimes we figure out, oh, well, my child isn't into that, but then they might have feel like they missed out. So still extend the opportunity. Don't necessarily force them, but also explain to them how is this opportunity different than the other opportunity, because they might have been turned off by one specific thing. Context. I love how you keep going back to context, because maybe one person is in this event that's not in this event, and that's the person that they were avoiding. So you really have to pay attention to those small details when it comes to children, because they're not going to say it out loud. They're just going to say, no, I'm not interested.
Right. And let me flip that one more time and go back to the context that I just finished working in Philly. Where there's a great deal of violence and homicides and other kinds of deaths, being able to acknowledge that being withdrawn in those contexts makes a lot of sense. Because if you can't go to the playground and go run around, or if you used to go to the playground and moms and everybody's nervous because it's dangerous out there, how do we deal with that? How do we take that withdrawal from what might be healthy and create another healthy context? And next question is, how do boundaries come into play with grieving children? I think all the questions are great. And I think this is another one. I think boundaries come into play because we have to look at what our family boundaries were prior to a loss and what they are now. So if we're talking about boundaries, let's say the child's very angry. Okay, is anger, and I'm going to go past anger and I'm going to go to rage. Is rage okay in my house? You might ask, what does that look like? Is it okay to tear stuff up and hit other people? No, that's not okay. But are their feelings okay? And how do we set boundaries around those feelings? And that's the part where I say some of this comes back to the adult being in touch with themselves in a way that they know what sets them off. So does the child's sadness set you off? And if their sadness sets you off, are you able to comfort them? Or do you say, shut that noise up? You've cried enough. Okay? And if that's where you're going, you have to step back and figure out, how can I allow my child to have all of these feelings and me be okay enough to help them hold them? Hold them in the house, hold them in a group setting, hold them in school, because this is what may happen. You may get a call 4 days in a row. Kevin can't sit in class. So what boundary are you going to hold with that school in that moment? His dad died. Why are we expecting that he could sit through 7 hours of school? So what's the negotiation? Because I think when we think about boundaries, oftentimes we think about the child first and not the whole environment that is influencing the child. Let's go. No, I won't go to Uvalde, but I'll just go in general on a daily basis. I think we need to unpack what we consider boundaries to be. What's your discipline practice? What's your support practice? How does it need to change when that child can't sleep anymore? And they can't sleep anymore because they used to always get a call from their friend or a text from their friend. Or they used to talk to their friend till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, even though they were breaking the rules.
I did that.
And now they can't sleep at all. So what's the boundary look like? Okay. That's up to you in terms of how you support your child in your household, because that child may just not be able to sleep. And they may just not be able to stop playing that music. So how are they trying to derive? How are they trying to calm their senses? How are they trying to get soothe that pain? How are they trying to find some pleasure in living when in fact they've been dulled out and numbed as a response to their person dying? So how do we help them revive themselves and sit in all the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that come when somebody dies, and when we lose someone in that kind of way? Hopefully that answered the question some.
Oh,
so
it more than answered the question.
Yeah. What are boundaries? What are our rules? What are our guidelines? Start with the adult first. Check myself. Get one of my friends to check me. Am I being too hard? Or am I not being firm enough? Because if they're out here drinking and driving, where's the boundary?
Right.
Because there needs to be safety in my home, physical, emotional, spiritual. Let's say the kid now wants to get out of Christianity because they don't believe that Jesus and God should have let their person die. Are you talking about that? Are you negotiating that? Are you letting their practices as they grow as a human being be channeled and challenged? So there's just all kind of boundaries.
So Mr. Carter, this is going to be a presentation that I'm going to post on my YouTube channel. I think that this, most of the things you can only see if you have the ticket, even the free ticket. Okay. But this, I feel like, is such a great conversation because the community doesn't know how to support children. If it's anything as you wanted to highlight before we close out this call on supporting kids, because I know that I won't say that my parents failed me, because I didn't go through any severe depression or substance abuse or any type of things like that, but I was not supported. I was not supported.
Yeah. And I want to say first, the way I look at this is just all of what you've been through is a gift to us, that you're turning into this platform and bringing us together. I want to say that. The other part is what you've just described is the level of complexity that children and adults have to negotiate in terms of dealing with loss and grief. And that's why I never oversimplify anything. And I know that we have to come up with ways of coping and ways of supporting each other. So I think if we can all allow the complexity to land on us and understand that you were looking from a child's point of view.
Right.
And now you're looking back through that child's eye, through adult eyes. And there's information from there that you can use to help with your own healing, which your children will pick up on. Even if they are quiet, they will sense more ease, or they might sense feelings and troubling. But if they get a sense that mom is doing her thing and she's being healthy and whole, that can only help. And I don't want to oversimplify that by making it sound easy, because this growth process that we're talking about is very difficult. I heard somebody say something, if you're really thinking about healing, be careful about what you're trying to do, because it's actually complex work, which speaks to what the conference is about. All of these, healers talking about ways of knowing themselves, ways of knowing their mind, body, spirit, and how to deal with grief and loss. So I just want to end there. I want to thank you. I want to thank the folks who have logged on. You can put my email in when you post the video so folks can contact me for training, consulting. And I will be doing some group work coming up sometime soon in the next couple of months. So thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. And I want to give a shout out to your sister and your family for bringing you here to this moment.
And today's her birthday.
Yes, happy birthday. What's her name again?
Serena.
Happy birthday, Serena.
So thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. And if you're watching the replay, still leave some questions down. I'll make sure they get to Mr. Carter, and he'll do his best to respond to you guys as the day goes on or the week goes on with the Going Too Soon retreat. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care.